Crunch. Plastic exploded against pavement before I even opened my eyes. That sound had become my Monday morning alarm, and every time I heard it, my stomach tightened before my feet touched the floor. I rushed to the front window, already knowing what I'd see, yet somehow hoping I was wrong. There she was. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, eased her gleaming black SUV backward with almost theatrical precision. She didn't swerve by accident. She didn't misjudge the distance. She lined up her tires with my trash can like a golfer aiming for the perfect shot. A quick tap on the accelerator, another sickening crunch, and the bin folded beneath her wheels as garbage scattered across the curb. She stopped just long enough to glance toward my house through oversized sunglasses. Even from behind the windshield, I recognized that smug little smile. Then she shifted into drive and rolled away, as if she'd simply completed another item on her morning checklist. I stepped onto my porch, staring at the mangled plastic lying in the street, while a few neighbors peeked through their curtains. Nobody came outside. Nobody asked if I was okay. They'd all seen this before. The worst part wasn't replacing another trash can. It wasn't cleaning coffee grounds and broken bags off the sidewalk. It was knowing she'd do it again next Monday, because nobody had ever stopped her. She thought my trash can would always be the easiest target on the block. She had absolutely no idea that this was the last one she would ever crush. What made it even worse was that this wasn't some bizarre one-time accident. It had become Karen's personal tradition. Every Monday, just after sunrise, she'd climb into that spotless SUV, back out of her driveway, and somehow manage to drive directly over my trash can. The first time, I convinced myself she'd simply been distracted. By the second, I questioned her driving. By the third, there wasn't a single doubt left in my mind. Nobody could be that consistently careless. This was deliberate. So every week, I bought another replacement. $60 here, $70 there. I'd wheel a brand new bin to the curb on Sunday night, and by Monday morning, it looked like it had lost a fight with a bulldozer. Cleaning spilled garbage before work became part of my routine, right alongside making coffee and checking the weather. The neighbors noticed everything. Some watched from their porches with awkward expressions, while others peeked through blinds pretending not to stare. A few even chuckled when they thought I couldn't hear them. Nobody confronted Karen. Nobody offered to be a witness. It was easier to treat my destroyed trash cans as neighborhood entertainment than challenge the woman who practically ran the HOA. I refused to stay quiet. I photographed the tire marks, collected repair receipts, and carried the shattered remains of one bin into an HOA meeting, setting it beside the conference table like evidence in a courtroom. Karen sat there with folded arms, wearing the same innocent smile she used whenever someone questioned her. The board barely glanced at my photos before one member shrugged. "It's just a trash can," he said. Another suggested I place it farther from the street, as though gravity somehow pulled Karen's SUV directly toward my property. Their indifference stung more than the broken plastic. Every meeting ended the same way, with excuses instead of accountability, while Karen walked out smiling, completely convinced she'd never face consequences for turning me into the neighborhood's favorite punchline. The next Monday sounded exactly like the ones before it. Another crunch, another ruined trash can, another trail of scattered garbage stretching halfway down the curb. I stood there holding a torn trash bag while Karen disappeared around the corner without so much as tapping her brakes. Strangely, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt calm, and that frightened me a little. Frustration had finally burned itself out, leaving something much more dangerous behind. Patience with a purpose. Arguing clearly wasn't working. The HOA had already chosen its side, and Karen enjoyed every complaint I filed because it reminded her she could get away with it. If I wanted this to end, I needed to stop thinking like a victim waiting for someone else to solve the problem. That afternoon, I started researching heavy-duty commercial trash containers, the kind designed for warehouses, restaurants, and construction sites. Reinforced plastic, thicker walls, industrial wheels. I compared specifications for hours. Every option promised durability, but they all shared one weakness. They were still plastic. Against 2 tons of moving SUV, even the toughest models would eventually lose. Then an idea crept into my mind so ridiculous I laughed out loud. By Friday evening, my garage door stayed closed. The radio played just loudly enough to drown out the sounds of tools, and bags of unfamiliar materials slowly disappeared inside. Neighbors walking their dogs slowed down whenever they passed my house. A couple waved, trying to peek past the narrow gap beneath the garage door, but I simply smiled and kept working. Even when someone casually asked what project I was tackling, I shrugged and said I was finally fixing something that had been bothering me for weeks. Late Sunday afternoon, I switched off the lights and stepped back. In the fading shadows, one silent shape stood in the middle of my garage. From a distance, it looked perfectly ordinary, exactly the way I wanted it. When the morning light spilled into the garage, I finally got to admire what I'd spent 2 long days creating. At first glance, it looked like nothing special. The lid sagged slightly to one side, the corners were scuffed, and the faded paint matched every cheap trash can Karen had already destroyed. Anyone driving past would have dismissed it as another plastic bin waiting to become Monday's victim. The difference was hidden beneath the surface. Inside the shell sat a solid core of reinforced concrete wrapped around a cage of steel rebar. It weighed several hundred pounds, enough that moving it even a few feet required every ounce of strength I had. The wheels underneath weren't there to make it easy to push. They were simply there to complete the illusion. From the outside, it still looked ordinary. From the inside, it was as stubborn as a bridge support. I spent hours perfecting the disguise. Fresh paint would have made Karen suspicious, so I rubbed dirt into the finish, scraped the sides with old sandpaper, and added a few scratches that matched the pattern on my previous destroyed bins. Even the cracked HOA sticker from the last can found a new home on the side. It looked tired, worn out, and completely defenseless. By Sunday evening, I slowly rolled it toward the curb. The wheels groaned under the weight, but once it settled into its familiar spot, it looked exactly where it belonged. I stepped back across the lawn, studying it from every angle. If I couldn't tell the difference from the street, neither could Karen. The neighborhood grew quiet as darkness settled in. Porch lights flickered on one by one, sprinklers hissed across freshly cut lawns, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked before everything fell silent again. I slept better than I had in weeks, not because I expected revenge, but because for the first time I felt prepared. Then Monday arrived. My alarm hadn't even gone off before I heard the unmistakable rumble of Karen's luxury SUV coming to life across the street. I was already sitting on my front porch with a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands. The sunrise painted the neighborhood in soft gold, and for a brief moment everything looked peaceful. Birds chirped from the maple trees. Sprinklers clicked across freshly cut lawns, and nothing hinted that this Monday would be any different from the last 6. Across the street, Karen's garage door lifted with its usual mechanical hum. Right on schedule. Her black SUV rolled backward into the driveway, stopping for just a second before continuing toward the curb. Even from where I sat, I could see her glance through the side mirror. Her eyes landed on my weathered trash can, and the familiar smirk spread across her face. It was the same expression she'd worn every week, the look of someone completely certain there would never be consequences. She straightened the steering wheel, tapped the accelerator, and drove directly into it. The sound that followed wasn't the hollow crunch of cheap plastic. It was a deafening metallic explosion that echoed down the entire street. The SUV stopped so abruptly its front end bounced upward before crashing back onto the pavement. The airbag erupted from the steering wheel with a loud pop, filling the cabin in an instant. Pieces of the front bumper scattered across the asphalt while coolant dripped beneath the engine in bright green streams. The trash can never moved. Not an inch. Karen shoved the driver's door open and stumbled outside, coughing through the cloud of airbag dust. Her perfectly styled hair stuck out in every direction, and her oversized sunglasses dangled from one ear. She stared at the untouched trash can, then back at the mangled front of her luxury SUV as though reality itself had betrayed her. "What is wrong with this thing?" she screamed, kicking the side of the can. The can didn't even wobble. Doors opened all along the street. Curious neighbors poured onto their porches, drawn by the crash. Within seconds, phones appeared in every direction. Some people whispered. Others openly laughed. One teenager zoomed in on the destroyed SUV while another neighbor quietly muttered, "Well, I guess she finally hit something that hit back." Karen spun toward my house, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You planned this. You set a trap." I slowly lifted my coffee, took another sip, and looked from her damaged SUV to the perfectly upright trash can with what I hoped was genuine confusion. "A trap?" I asked calmly. "It's just a trash can." The silence that followed was broken only by muffled laughter spreading through the crowd. And for the first time since this ridiculous feud began, Karen wasn't the one smiling. By that afternoon, an emergency HOA meeting had been scheduled exactly as Karen demanded. She marched into the clubhouse carrying a thick folder of photographs showing her crumpled bumper, cracked grille, and deployed airbags. She slapped the pictures onto the conference table and declared that I had deliberately planted a dangerous booby trap to destroy her vehicle. Listening to her, you'd think she'd been the innocent victim, instead of someone who had spent weeks driving over another person's property. When it was finally my turn to speak, I stayed seated. I placed my own folder on the table and quietly slid it toward the board members. Inside were purchase receipts, material invoices, photographs documenting every destroyed trash can, repair costs, and copies of every complaint I'd previously submitted to the HOA. I also included time-stamped security camera images showing Karen's SUV striking my bins week after week. The room grew noticeably quieter. One board member slowly flipped through the evidence before looking directly at Karen. Another asked why there had been so many repeated incidents involving the same homeowner. Suddenly, the discussion wasn't about my trash can anymore. It was about a pattern of property damage everyone had chosen to ignore. Karen's confidence evaporated. She insisted I had weaponized my trash can, waving her arms and raising her voice with every sentence. But the louder she became, the calmer everyone else seemed. Even the board members, who had dismissed my earlier complaints, looked uncomfortable, now that the evidence was impossible to overlook. Instead of voting to fine me, they began discussing whether Karen should reimburse me for the destroyed bins and the repeated damage to my property. Her face turned crimson. She protested, interrupted, and demanded someone defend her, but no one did. For the first time since this ordeal began, the authorities she'd always hidden behind had quietly stepped aside, leaving her alone to face the consequences of her own choices. Karen left the meeting furious, carrying repair bills, public embarrassment, and growing pressure to reimburse me for every trash can she destroyed. By the next Monday, neighbors were joking about the world's strongest trash can, and for once, everyone laughed with me instead of at me. That's when I realized the best revenge isn't shouting or seeking payback. Sometimes it's simply letting someone's own choices catch up with them. Do you think Karen got exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for more.